You see, I find it kind of sad that the first predictive search that Google comes up with when you type Battle of is the Battle of the Bastards. And yeah, Game of Thrones is great, but there are far better stories to be found in real history. The stories that are the very inspiration for series like Game of Thrones. I mean, what do you want in a story? You want there to be money, power, betrayal, blood, fighting, friends one day, enemies the next, Machiavellian scheming of all kinds. Real history has it all, and I guarantee that you will not be disappointed. Before we really get into this, I'd just like to say that I'm no expert. I haven't studied history in the traditional sense, I'm just fascinated by it. So if I get anything wrong or miss anything out, just let me know in the comments and we can have a real good old-fashioned discussion about it. So hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Historofiles. This series aims to take a quick look at historical events, and the first one, this one, is about the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403. So as is often the case in stories like this, it all starts with a man who wants to be king. The only hitch is that he isn't technically the next in line for the throne. Henry Bolingbroke was an English noble with a rather strange relationship with the king, Richard II. They were first cousins and had been friends since childhood, but royal families are just like any other and are prone to arguments and fallings out. The only difference is, though, when it's a normal family, it just results in hurt feelings and maybe not seeing each other at Christmas. When it's royalty, on the other hand, it can lead to bitter, bitter war. The first major disagreement Henry had with Richard came in 1387, when Henry was part of the Lords Appellants Rebellion, and despite being on the losing side, he was mysteriously not punished by the king. Then, 11 years later, Henry made a remark which was taken as treason by another lord. As you do, they agreed to fight a duel of honour. But before they could fight, the king just simply decided to banish them both from the kingdom. When Henry's father died, and Richard prevented him from inheriting his father's wealth, he returned to England while Richard was fighting in Ireland, launching a swift and effective campaign to take the throne. Once he took the throne, he put King Richard in prison, where he would later die. In suspicious circumstances, to say the least. It's presumed that he starved. And so now we come to 1403, and Henry IV is King of England, but all is not as he would have hoped. The Welsh, under Owain Glendower, have risen in rebellion and are enjoying some real success, capturing numerous English nobles and holding them to ransom. Meanwhile, many of the nobles who hated Richard II are now regretting helping Henry to take the throne. One of the captives of the Welsh is Sir Edward Mortimer. The king refused to pay his ransom, and the already fragile relationship was destroyed, causing Mortimer to turn his coat and join the rebels in their fight against Henry. Let's now take a look to the north, way north, right on the Scottish border in Northumberland, where the Percy family call home. Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, had helped Henry to become king, and had even lent him exorbitant sums of money, somewhere in the region of £20,000. The Percys were one of the largest and wealthiest families in England, and as was the way of English nobles, they were jealous and power-hungry, always looking for a way to increase their own wealth and standing. This is why they helped Henry to become king in the first place, for the rewards that would come their way once he was in power: titles, land, and money. And they didn't just stop there. Henry Harry Hotspur Percy, the Earl of Northumberland's son, I know, okay, it's all very confusing. They really could have done with diversifying their names a little, I know. Anyway, he had gone to Wales to help the new king deal with the situation there, and had obviously expected the king to honour his payment for this service. So while the Welsh are kicking up a fuss in the west, the Scots are up to their usual tricks, raiding into northern England and giving the Percys a really hard time. Only unlike in Wales, the Percys have struck a real blow against the Scots, capturing the Earl of Douglas in battle. Delighted to hear this, Henry demands that Northumberland deliver the captive Douglas to him. Now this is a risky demand, because nobles held to ransom are worth a fortune to the person that holds them, and Percy really doesn't want to give up his claim to these riches. Obviously, the king would give him some money as a reward for the capture, but it would be nowhere near what the actual ransom would be worth. So let's stop for a second and assess the situation. The king owes the Percys a lot of money. He owes them rewards for their help in taking power, their services in Wales, and an enormous loan. Then, on top of all that, he wants to deprive them of the wealth they would gain through the ransom of the Earl of Douglas. You really couldn't make this up, could you? Anyway, obviously they are seriously mad now. And what do the great families of England do when their pride and purses are hurt? They go to war. Hang on. This is England and Wales. The king lives here, in London, and Northumberland is way up here. Not exactly neighbours. So to start things off, Northumberland releases Douglas on the condition that he joins them in the rebellion. If he can't have the ransom, then by God, no one will. He then sends his son Harry Hotspur south to raise support in Cheshire, primarily among veterans of the former King's Cheshire Guard. He did this by making a proclamation based on the lie that King Richard was returning from exile and that his father, Northumberland, was marching south with an army to join him. Hotspur therefore marches south at the head of an army made up of men from Northumberland, Cheshire, Wales, and even a few Scots. The Percys also made an alliance with the Welsh rebels under Owain Glendower, who agreed to send forces to join them. Meanwhile, Prince Henry is stationed at Shrewsbury, here, with a small army, poised to fight the Welsh rebels, who are here. At the same time, Henry is marching north from London at the head of a large army with the intention of supporting Northumberland against the Scots. So these are the four armies currently in the field. The royal forces have King Henry marching north from London. Prince Henry is stationed at Shrewsbury. Meanwhile, Harry Hotspur is marching south from Cheshire, while Owain Glendower is here in Wales. It's likely that the king was suspicious of Northumberland's treason, but it was only here at Lichfield during his march north where he became aware of the rebel army that was marching south. He therefore took his substantial army and marched due west to Shrewsbury to reinforce Prince Henry, who was there with a few thousand men who would be easily overwhelmed by the combined forces of Harry Hotspur and Owain Glendower. It was here, at Shrewsbury, where the battle would take place. The king's army was arranged into three battles. King Henry had the centre, Prince Henry had the left, and the Earl of Stafford had the right. The rebels, on the other hand, were arranged in one long line along the ridge. They had their men-at-arms in the rear and their archers at the front. At roughly noon, the king's army advances through the pea fields under heavy fire from rebel archers. Stafford's battle suffers heavy losses and flees the field when Stafford himself is killed by an arrow. In the meantime, the king's archers have also come into range and begin to return fire. The archery duel is deadly for both sides, but the king's men have suffered greatly. Knowing that he cannot stand and wait for the king's men to reach the crest and make their superior numbers count, Hotspur leads a charge into the wavering enemy, aiming for the king in the centre of the line. Conventional thinking suggests that this was born of Hotspur's wild and battle-hungry nature, which is where he got his nickname. But in reality, it was a sound and logical decision, militarily speaking. The royal forces had the advantage in numbers, and given time, they would surely make this count. Seeing the devastation his archers had caused, Hotspur saw an opportunity to strike a mortal blow. They were, after all, playing for all the marbles at this point. If the rebel charge can kill the king, then the battle would turn into a rout, and he would have won the throne for his father. The charge is successful, pushing the king's banner back down the slope, and notably resulting in the death of a royal standard bearer, Sir Thomas Blout, at the hands of Archibald Douglas, the released Scottish lord. Meanwhile, on the left of the king's line, his son, Prince Henry, still commanded a large proportion of his men and was pushing forward into the rebel battle line. It was in this battle that Harry would begin to forge a reputation as a talented warrior and skilled commander, brave in the face of the enemy and capable of inspiring men to great feats. All this would prove vital 13 years later during the Agincourt campaign, when he sailed to Normandy to stake his claim on the French throne. At some point during the fighting, he was even struck in the face by an arrow, piercing his cheek and almost killing him. He recovered, but was left horribly scarred for the rest of his life. As the left pushed on, the centre had absorbed Hotspur's charge, and the royal forces began to close around the rebel wedge. Surrounded and cut off from their own line, the rebel forces showed incredible bravery, fighting on against impossible odds. During this deadly melee, Hotspur was struck down. There is some debate about how he died. Some say he was hit by an arrow when he lifted his visor to look around the battlefield, while others say he was cut down by an enemy knight. Whatever the truth of the matter, Harry Hotspur Percy was dead. With their leader dead, the rebels had nothing left to fight for and began to fall back. This retreat soon turned into a rout, with the victorious royal forces chasing the remnants of the rebel army from the field. Thousands were left dead, dying or wounded, and the rebel forces were utterly destroyed. With this victory, Henry IV cemented his place on the throne, where he would remain for another 10 years. In 1413, he died from illness, with his son Henry succeeding him. Henry V would then go on to become one of the most famous kings in English history, known as a warrior king and famous for his piety. Despite only being crowned after his father's death, Henry V had already taken much of the effective power from him in 1410. He then died at the age of 35 in 1422, king of both England and France. The Percys, on the other hand, would remain one of the largest and wealthiest families in England. They continued to be jealous and greedy, as they always had been, and they were not the only ones. Along with the Nevilles, they would be one of the main forces at play in the Great Wars of the Roses, which raged across England after the death of Henry V. Today, the Battlefield of Shrewsbury can be visited, and a footpath leads you right through the middle, along the very line of advance that the royal forces took. Right in the middle, where the fiercest fighting occurred, there now stands a church, known as Battlefield Church. The references for all the information that I used making this video can be found in the description box below. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and hitting that subscribe button. Bye!